So in about
Okay.
3 seconds, it's going to pop up. So you do whatever you got to do, and I'll wait for you.
Okay. So I'm going to start off here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have the best channel, the number one channel, the number one source for Tupac content out on YouTube, bar none. I have my special guest, Jesse Surratt, also known as Jmix, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jmix, and go ahead and let you plug anything before we get started on this interview.
Yeah, I guess if I was to plug anything, I would just have people who are interested in Tupac check out some of the interviews with some of the people I did on Jmix Death Row channel or Jmix Jesse Surratt Productions. And I encourage everybody to do their own research. The platform is just about spreading information from people that knew Pac and people that are working the case. So that's the platform, and that's all we really want people to do is learn more about Tupac.
All right. Well, thank you, JMix, for that. I certainly appreciate you being here tonight and doing this interview with me. It's been a long time in the running, and got a whole lot of questions for you tonight, and hopefully we can get some of these questions answered. I know that there's been some questions that have been answered already, so it may just be redundant at some point, but I think for the most part we have an interesting show tonight. So I'm going to start off with just general basic knowledge of who you are as far as how you got started doing this Tupac thing, what piqued your interest, and just how it all got started.
I used to run a website called TupacNation.net, and what it was a forum board where people went to talk about Tupac. One of the threads was a question about remixing, and I guess I was kind of early on to the social media thing, but people were, they were guessing between each other, who remixed this song, and they were trying to guess samples. And my idea was, why don't we just ask the people? And the replies they're hard to get to, and I'm like, well, it couldn't hurt just to ask them. So what I did is I just started sending out social media friend requests and just started asking people, hey, I'm from Tupac Nation. We had some questions for you about your work with Tupac. And my mom told me a long time ago, you would be surprised what you get, is all you got to do is ask. And that's kind of how it worked with the interviews. So back in 2012, I just asked a bunch of people if they wanted to do interviews, and the ball kind of got rolling from there. This channel morphed into something that I didn't expect it to. But it all started out just trying to find out about Tupac and trying to talk to his engineers and see what different songs were and when they were recorded.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So you said that you were actually were you the moderator? Were you the creator of the Tupac Nation? Is it still available to these days, or is it now defunct?
It's now defunct. I came on pretty late in the scene, I guess, and I was made a moderator, and then I was made an admin. And the person that owned the website was just unavailable. Couldn't get a hold of the guy. And when it came time to renew the license, nobody could get a hold of him, and he's the only guy with the keys. So the website went down, but the YouTube channel remains.
Okay. So now you were talking about that you were started off doing that, and then you started getting into interviews. Tell me how easy or how hard it was to actually get some of the people that you actually interviewed, and at the same time, can you tell me exactly? You could actually name off a few of the people that you've interviewed and tell us your most difficult one to get and your easiest one to get.
Well, I started off. I reached out to Kathy Scott. Kathy Scott was one of the first people I interviewed. Anytime that someone was promoting a book or a new revision, those are pretty easy. Greg Kading was a pretty easy get. I guess the hardest person it was to lock down an interview was Spice One. Spice One is a really, really cool dude, but it's kind of like me and you a little bit over the course of years, though. It took about 4 years of back and forth with Spice One to actually get him on the phone, because there was always some kind of scheduling conflict. Another funny story is Jerry Heller. I had been talking back and forth with Jerry Heller's publicist. I'm trying to remember her name, it's slipping me. But I was talking to his publicist, and actually Jerry Heller, I was supposed to land Jerry Heller's interview the day that he had a heart attack in his car.
Wow.
So that's probably, I guess, that'd be the hardest one because I never got him. And I'm working on Tretch right now. It's just he's another one I've been working on for a few years. That's just kind of tough to land.
Yeah, you mentioned Spice One, and he actually had a really good song with Tupac. I think it was on America's. Was it most? I can't even think of the name of it, but it was the one of the albums. He had a really good track with Tupac. I didn't actually hear the interview, but did he have anything really interesting to say about Tupac?
Yeah, he told a story about them that's kind of well known now about Hennessy and apple juice. And he told another story about them being too young to actually buy 40 ounces. So they would stand outside the store, and they're both at this point, Tupac's a rapper, Spice One's a rapper, and they would catch someone who recognized them, and they would have that person buy them beers. And one of the stories that Spice One told was him and Tupac are walking down the street drinking 40s after they had this situation happen, and a cop stopped him. And instead of citing him for it, he's like, if you can up in that 40 right now, I won't cite you for it. So it's Spice One and Tupac slamming a 40 so they don't get cited or arrested. Then he was talking about how they were walking around messed up for the rest of the day and how the cop cut him a break because they chugged it. I always thought that was quite entertaining.
Oh my God, you got me laughing over here. That's a pretty good story. Um, God, you got me. Okay, I can't even concentrate over here. So when you speak of Craig Kading, and you said that you had got the interview, and I can't say that I've actually heard the interview, but you came out with the release of the unheard audio of you and him doing a debate with Antoine Beatty. Now, let me ask you this. At one point, you did mention that you lost connection, and you said that Greg actually, during the conversation, towards the tail end of the conversation, he flew out the handle. Do you want to speak on exactly what made him fly out the handle that you want to speak about, or you rather keep that under wraps?
No, that's fine. It's open book. We had set up an interview or a debate via Anton Beatty on Anton Beatty's channel. And it started out, me and Greg don't like each other. It's pretty evident. So it started out as, for what people have heard, it was a pretty rough debate. We were going back and forth at each other. He had brought up my criminal history, and you can hear that early on in the released portion of the interview. And when he brought up my criminal history, I was waiting for him with his cop ties to bring up more. My Wi-Fi had cut out, and I recorded it via Skype. So Anton Beatty called me back, and he was like, if you continue to do this interview or this debate, I'm recording it on my end. I'll send you a copy. And I was kind of hesitant, but I was like, yeah, that's fine. So when we get back in the interview, Greg Kading, every time I would start to ask a question, he would kind of circle back to my criminal history. And from what I can remember of it, I believe when it started to go downhill is he brought up my mom. He had brought up my mom in a way to kind of paint me as coming from a criminal family because she had an arrest when she was younger, which is, I have no problem saying, it's inciting a riot. She got into a bar fight. And when he brought up my mom, things kind of deteriorated pretty quickly. And I think I called him a dirty cop, and we started yelling back and forth at each other. And at that point, whatever formal debate kind of collapsed into just a disaster. Needless to say, it didn't make me look very good, nor did it make Greg Kading look very good. And I think that is why Anton never gave me a copy of the rest of it, nor has he ever released it. So Anton Beatty is not a man of his word whatsoever.
So you don't have any contact with him, right? I think you mentioned that RJ Bond has some kind of connection to him still.
Yes, RJ emails him sometimes, and right around the release of Battle for Compton, I guess that they had kind of patched up whatever disagreements they had. But no, I have no way to contact Anton Beatty. And like I said, and I'll put this out there for your channel as well, if Anton Beatty wants to release the rest of that debate, I will give him $1,000.
There you go, Antoine Beatty. This is your your open invite to release that. And actually, you know what? Matter of factly, I'll throw 500 on top of that if he releases that portion of the unheard Greg Kading flying off the handle. I'll offer $500 on that, so that makes it $1,500. And in this economy, I'm sure that Antoine Beatty could use it, especially since he's a teacher. And no offense to teachers, but they really don't get paid a whole lot of money. So, well, and Venom Lives will throw 20. He says so. Anyhow, so you speak
Right
on
on.
you speak on Greg Kading, and when about? Because I know you interviewed him. When about did you start just kind of distancing yourself, or did you ever even believe in his theory, even at the beginning before you started listening or started hearing and started doing your own investigation on Tupac Shakur's murder?
Well, to be honest with you, when I interviewed Greg Kading for the first time, it was in 2012, I believe. I had just read his book when his book came out. It's 2012, 2013. I'd read his book and I thought, I'm like, wow, this has got a lot of information of it. And if this is true, this could tie up a lot of loose ends and, help convince people who are struggling with the Orlando Anderson situation, because of no arrest and how he was killed early. So I thought there was a lot of good information in the book, and I even told him so. It kind of fell apart, though, a little bit afterwards, because as soon as I interviewed Greg Kading, I was just moving on to the next interview. And I know that Tupac the Early Years was supposed to come out, which is a project by Atron Gregory about Tupac's early life. And one of the directors and producers of that was R.J. Bond. So I interviewed R.J. Bond subsequently after Greg Kading. When that interview was posted, I got an email from Greg Kading, and it said, "This is your boy Bond." And what it was an internal affairs report that RJ had made with the LAPD saying that some of the information that was out already in Murder Rap was endangering certain witnesses' lives. But when he sent it to me and he said, "Your boy Bond," the first picture, when you get an email, it shows you a screenshot, was RJ Bond's unredacted address, all his information. And once I
Okay.
saw that, because I've had dealings with police in my life, I kind of took that as a subtle threat that I'm willing to, because to me, I didn't know RJ Bond. He was a film producer. And I took it, if Greg Kading, just because this guy doesn't agree with your theory, is willing to dox you online, he wanted me to post this document.
Okay.
And once that happened, it made me very, very wary of Greg Kading. And it made me kind of start to dig on Greg Kading, because I felt that that was a tactic, and I still believe that that was a tactic to kind of shut up RJ. And the more I dug into Greg Kading's background, the more nefarious I found all his activities to be.
Okay. Now, I remember during that conversation, actually, before on the interview you did with Greg Kading, before you lost connection, you had said that Wayman Anderson. You want to talk about Wayman Anderson. What were you alluding to exactly when you said that? When I think it had something to do with the Keefe D confession. Do you remember what that was
Yeah,
exactly?
well, I think that I was getting down to the point. A little background for those that don't know. Wayman Anderson was a confidential informant that LAPD would use, and he was listed by Steve Strong as one of their top confidential informants. This means that the information that Wayman Anderson was giving them would come back verified. It was good info. He was giving them good info the whole time. So during the debate, I tried to bring up Wayman Anderson because Greg had used some of Wayman Anderson's information while writing Murder Rap. Well, it come to find out, Wayman Anderson completely changed his story, and Wayman Anderson was pointing the finger at Death Row. So what I was trying to do in the debate was impeach the witness that he used, because Wayman Anderson has since kind of changed his tune. So that's what I was trying to do, was to catch him up on Wayman Anderson. That's why I brought him up. Now, for those that don't know, he was a rapper named Suave, and he is doing life in prison for a fire. And you'll notice about the confidential informants that are used by, whether it be Bobby Ladd or Greg Kading, once they get enough information out of these people, And it's notable to say that Wayman Anderson was used to convict LAPD officers of wrongdoing. But once they used him for his information, they locked their confidential informants up on other charges. Wayman Anderson was locked up for a fire that eventually led to the deaths of 2 people. And Wayman Anderson's biggest complaint was, I gave you all this information and you guys are now trying to bury me to where I can't talk anymore. So when I brought up Wayman Anderson to Greg Kading, I was trying to impeach his own witness. Because just like Eugene Deal has said, Greg Kading took Wayman Anderson out of context.
Do you want to talk about Michael Psycho Robinson? You want to add anything about him?
It's kind of it's out of my comfort zone to do so. You know, I like to speak on people that I have enough information to make a confident answer on. I don't like to speculate. I like to speak right from my own well of knowledge, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can certainly appreciate that. Yeah, they you know, he just, to me, Greg Kading pretty much just danced around in that whole debate, so to speak. But if you really think about it, it really wasn't a structured debate, just because I think, as RJ Bonner said, it's probably the right idea if you want to do a real debate to probably go live, head to head, face to face on video, so that you're able to just have some true rebuttals for the other person's question, if you do have one, or lies, if it's that. So we'll move on from Wayman Anderson, and just to let you know about Wayman Anderson, I don't know if you knew this or not, but he had sent out a change.org. He had sent out a petition to try to get himself out of prison, for he feels like he's been falsely accused. And I know you said something about a fire, but did they have enough evidence to really secure a conviction on him to get life in prison?
It was pretty weak. I believe they found a business card outside the residence, or in the residence, that tied Wayman Anderson to the case. But in Wayman's own defense, he says that he was out of state and had the plane tickets to prove it. So the evidence they used to lock up Wayman Anderson was circumstantial and weak at best. Wayman Anderson is a very interesting case for those out there who want to go to the details of what's going on with him legally. It would appear to the layman even that it looks like that they want him in prison.
Okay, so we're gonna segue. Thank you for that. Anybody that wants to learn more about Wayman Anderson, go ahead and go out there and do your investigation. But we're gonna move on to the meat and potatoes of this conversation, and that was going to be regarding Battle of Compton. You were part producer of it with RJ Bond, and there was a few questions that I have, and there was a few questions that were sent to me about the actual movie, and wanted to ask you, what did you think about Controversy Radio's spin on pretty much on the elements of Battle of Compton?
Well, I like Jesse from Controversy Radio. I think that he did a deep delve into the little half-dead Snoop beef. I don't want to ever be in a position where to criticize another person's work. Jesse goes into the blood sacrifice thing and that angle, which I don't follow that much. But I think that the information that he's putting out there about dates, times, and places is accurate. It's just it's a direction that I don't really follow, because it falls along the lines of your Illuminati types and you know, your blood sacrifice type of thing. But I think for what it is and what he presented, that he did a good job at that.
Do you think Snoop Dogg has? Do you think he has a little bit more knowledge than what is portrayed out there? Do you think he knows a little bit more about what actually took place and what happened?
Absolutely, without a doubt. The thing about Snoop is Snoop has told many different versions of the same story, and I found that when people tell the truth, the story pretty much stays the same. A good way to catch someone lying about something is, does their story change? And I think over the years, even most fans can recognize that Snoop seems to tell different versions of the same story. The last time he saw Pac, or the parasailing story that he told at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction that nobody had ever heard of before. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying that Snoop seems to come across with an attitude when people ask him about Tupac, if anybody's ever noticed that. I think that Snoop kind of tries to distance himself from Tupac because I believe that deep down he's still insecure about, still even to this day, living in the shadow of Tupac at Death Row Records. Because everybody has to keep in mind, before Tupac came to Death Row Records, Snoop was the star. I believe that Suge even pulled Tupac to the side at one point and told him, you have to keep in mind, this is the house that Snoop built. Now, as for foreknowledge, I believe that Snoop, with the rift of DPG and the blood section of Death Row Records, I believe that there's a lot of people in that camp that had knowledge of that something was going to happen. If you notice, there was no members of DPG in Vegas that night. And if you look at clips, you know, from Daz Dillinger saying we were on that F Death Row stuff for a while now, or don't mess this up, homie, most of the time, and most of the instances, you can see that the only person involved in the DPG camp that was in Vegas that night was Nate Dogg. And if you know anything about Nate Dogg didn't roll with any set. Nate Dogg was his own guy. He was a Marine and he stood by himself. But back to the foreknowledge question, or my statement of foreknowledge, I believe there was definite foreknowledge there. Maybe and to be fair for those that are on the fence, it might not even be about Tupac's murder, but I definitely feel that there's enough circumstantial evidence to say that they knew something bad was going to happen that night in Vegas.
No, do you think the wheels were set in motion before that incident happened, where Snoop Dogg was actually on the plane when they were headed back to Vegas, or wherever they were headed back to, and you know the whole story with Little Half Dead talking about the Rolls Royces, and his explanation to how it all went down was kind of little shaky. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, you have Snoop on one hand saying they were here, and then you have him saying they were over here in another conversation he has. So do you think the wheels are set in motion before that incident, or do you think that incident that happened in that plane that day when Suge and wouldn't let Snoop Dogg's bodyguards get on the plane is what set the wheels in motion to have Tupac taken care of?
I don't think that's what set the wheels in motion, but I think that it did help exasperate it. I know that there's an incident that it's highly debated, but Chris Nassif came out, and he's an agent in Hollywood, and he said that Suge had told him that Tupac had slapped Snoop and threw him in the back of a SUV where the luggage was when they were flying out to a certain location. I think that the rift between Snoop and Tupac was a very old rift, going all the way back to 92, 93. And I don't think that it was the incident on the plane that set those wheels in motion. I believe that those wheels had been set in motion long before that. But if anything, that incident just served to show that Snoop what side he should fall on. And I'll tell you what, just my opinion alone, if the owner of the record label is pulling security off of me to threaten me, I'm going to be on my F Death Row stuff from that point on as well.
Do you think that you got me thinking here, Jmix, about this? Have you directly or indirectly, has Little Half Dead, has he made a statement that he'd be willing to do an interview with you, or does he not like you anymore because of the, I guess, allegations that have been directed at him with the whole Battle of Compton movie coming out?
Well, you know, Donald Smith, his Christian name, he's been friends with me on Facebook for quite a while. I've reached out to him for an interview. So far, I've not gotten any answer back. So far as liking me, I'm not sure. You know, probably doesn't. But I've never talked to him. I've tried to reach out to him. I've tried to land interviews with Little Half Dead, but he's not interested in speaking with me.
You know, it'd be very interesting if he was willing to take a polygraph test. I think if he did something like that, then he probably could exclude himself from it. But it seems like the people that have been accused of crimes, they don't want to do those kind of things. They don't want to take any kind of polygraph test, or matter of factly, this is the way I see it. If you're innocent of a crime, why even worry about it? I mean, people accuse people of stuff all the time, but if it's not true, just kind of carry on with your day, I guess. So moving on to Las Vegas, the night of the fight, you have the individuals that were inside the car. So let me ask you this, because I hear different stories all the time, and one of the stories we hear was there was four individuals in the car, right, in Las Vegas that pulled up to Suge and Pac's BMW and shot in, of course, killed Tupac and grazed, or whatever you want to call it, to Suge Knight. Are you in agreement or disagreement that there was four people in that Cadillac that night?
That's a tough one. If you look at witness statements, it was Frank Alexander who said that he saw two for sure, and he thought there were more in the car. But not one of the witness statements, if you go from Edie to Frank to Gaddafi, not one of them can give an exact number of people that were in the car. I firmly believe, as I have for several years now, that Malcolm and Danny Patton were in that car. Was Little Half Dead in that car? I don't know. I don't have enough evidence to say that Little Half Dead was in that car. But I believe, just based on the initial police reports, that there were at least two, if not three people. The four people being in the car started becoming mainstream and popular with the Keith Davis confession, which came out in the murder rap book. But I don't see enough evidence to say positively that there was four people in the car. And
Okay.
my mix up of, or my opinion on who was in that car might differ from other people's.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, that kind of narrows things down. Now, don't you find it interesting that when they did the special with Ben Crump and that whole ordeal with what we've figured out to be at the end, big surprise that the gun is found in the backyard by a dog or whatnot. But then you find it interesting that they didn't have Danny Patton or Malcolm Patton on the series.
Oh, I think it's pretty interesting. I'll give you some inside baseball. I know one of the producers of the series early on. Stephanie Fredericks was a producer of the series, and she kind of got pushed out by Lolita Files, who obviously had a dog in the fight because she had written Once Upon a Time in Compton, Bobby Ladd, and Tim Brennan's book. But to go back to that, I was told by Stephanie Fredericks that their showrunner, Frank, they knew where the Pattons were, but Frank didn't want to go there. That they were scared to go to where the Pattons were. That they could have got that interview, but they did not want to go to the neighborhood. That's what I've been
Which
told.
which is in Lancaster, California.
I believe so. I'm not sure their exact address. I'm just relaying to you the information that I was given, that they were scared to go talk to those people. Now, I find it very interesting that I look at it two ways. They could have used Greg Kading's footage, just like they used R.J. Bond's footage of Michael Moore and Frank Alexander in that show. They could have used Greg Kading's footage of Malcolm and Danny Patton. But I believe the Susan Constantine body language expert blowing them out of the water probably made A&E steer clear from Danny Patton, because they knew that their witnesses had already been impeached. And with them dismissing, like if you saw on the show with the Kenner theory, they talk about to Randall Sullivan, they're just dismissing theories. And I think once it got down to the final three episodes, that they already had their agenda, that they were going to push the Tim Brennan Bobby Ladd story. So one of two things happened. Either Frank, the showrunner, was really scared to go into the neighborhood to interview the Pattons, or they had never planned on airing that side of the story anyway. They were going to dismiss it right off.
Got it. Yeah, it seemed like it was the narrative was with this was what they were gonna just blame it on the book, or actually the book was gonna be the holy grail of the case and slam shut. But speaking on that, and this is kind of trivial, and I'm just gonna jump into this real quick. Didn't Frank Alexander live in Lancaster, California?
When Frank Alexander died, he lived in Marietta, California.
Marietta, California. Okay, good deal. Now, we're gonna go back to September 7th, 1996. I have a question for you as far as for Kevin Gaines. Can you let us know, in your personal opinion, did Kevin Gaines have anything to do with any element of September 7th?
I firmly believe so. I absolutely believe so. Kevin Gaines was on administrative discipline during that time. He was he had been caught. I believe the story goes that he had been caught calling 911 on himself due to a domestic situation, and they put him on a desk job. He was supposed to be at a desk in Los Angeles during that whole week of September. Not only was he not on that desk job, but he was in Vegas when he wasn't supposed to be, 3 days prior and a few days after Tupac's death. To me, that's a giant red flag. And the fact that he was killed about a year later by Frank Liga speaks amounts to me, because we have to keep in mind Kevin Gaines was Sharifa Knight's lover. He was there was an instance where they had raided Kevin Gaines's house and Sharifa Knight was in bed with him. So that is proven. So if you want, I personally believe that Sharifa Knight and Reggie Wright Jr. Set this up, got the wheels in motion to do a hit on Suge. And I firmly believe that with the appearance of Kevin Gaines in Las Vegas, that Kevin Gaines there's a high probability that he was involved with the murder. And if you look at what happened to Kevin Gaines shortly after the Tupac murder, that it further goes to solidify what dirty cops will do to get rid of people that are involved.
But in what capacity do you say Kevin Gaines played? I mean, if he had in your opinion, if he had to narrow down his participation in it, what was he? Was he a lookout? Was he a source of information? What exactly do you think he was?
Well, I view Kevin Gaines as Sharifa's inside man. Now, if we point this at Sharifa and Reggie Wright Jr., Reggie Wright Jr. has his inside people. Sharifa Knight is going to have her inside people. So if you go by the letter, the confession letter, the patent letter, it says that there were spotters at different checkpoints. I think at the very least, circumstantial evidence would go to show that Kevin Gaines, at the very least, was probably one of those spotters in Las Vegas. There has been no timeline or account given because of his early murder of why he was there, what he was doing there, and in what capacity he was there as. So I think at the very least, in my opinion, he would be a spotter, if not someone sitting directly in the car. And
Okay,
it's not to interrupt you, but it's a high probability that that voice that came over the radio that said got him was Kevin Gaines.
very interesting. So do you think that Frank Liga killing Kevin Gaines had any tie? You think that was a sanctioned hit by LAPD, or do you think it was just a random shooting and Frank Liga didn't know who Kevin Gaines was?
I would have to go towards sanction hit. Frank Liga has since came out a few years ago and said that not only the official story that he told to Russ Poole was that he didn't know who it was. The guy was throwing gang signs and he saw a gun and he shot him. Well, years later, Frank Liga admitted that he had met Kevin Gaines before. He did know that he was a cop, and if there were more people in the car with him, that more the better, that he would have been happy killing more people. So I think that Frank Liga kind of hangs himself on his own rope when he came out and admitted he knew who Kevin Gaines was. Now that changes the narrative. If Frank Liga knew who Kevin Gaines was, then he knew he was a cop, and then he wouldn't have known he was a gangbanger. So that makes his story not make any sense. I think Frank Liga knew exactly who Kevin Gaines was, and I deduced that by his own words.
Do you think Suge Knight had any kind of do you think Suge Knight had any association with Frank Liga?
I can't prove that, but what I can point to is there was a tip, an informant tip to Russell Poole concerning Kevin Gaines while he was still alive. And what this confidential informant, I believe his name was Mike Soto, to be honest with you, but what he said is Kevin Gaines' job at Death Row Records was to oversee and be a lookout on cocaine transactions, on drug transactions, that he would be the lookout, make sure that they weren't bothered by police, and he would set up places that they could do drug exchanges. Now, as far as Suge Knight's knowledge of Kevin Gaines, I believe that Suge Knight, and you can look at what's going on with Suge Knight today. I believe that Suge Knight knew exactly what Kevin Gaines was doing at Death Row Records and concerning the drugs. But I think it's that same knowledge that Suge Knight has is the same reason that they're trying to bury him today. Because like I've said before many, many times, some of the people that were lieutenants or rookie officers are now sergeants in the LAPD. And it was a couple weeks ago that LAPD cops were caught smuggling drugs from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, which means that they're still doing the old games that they were doing in 1996, as well as people like Reggie Wright Jr. So I hope I didn't convolute that answer, but as far as Suge's knowledge of Kevin Gaines, I think that Suge knew that he was a dirty cop on the payroll, but I think that Suge was sheltered from any knowledge of what happened before, during, and after the hit on him.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because I believe ultimately that the shooting on September 7th in Vegas was an attempt on Suge Knight's life.
Well, speaking of cops, and when I carry on with speaking with cops, I know that there was an interview on another station. I'm not going to say any names, but there was a mention of a police officer who was, because Greg Kading has come out in the past and said that there wasn't, or there's been very little. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was zero to none police officers who worked for Death Row Records that were LAPD. And in the interview on this other station, this, I don't want to say any names. I don't want to say his name, but he mentions Rich McCauley as being one of the police officers that was there. When he was talking, he said Rich McCauley was there that night. Then he stops and goes into his recollection and says that no, he wasn't there. Any reason why you believe he would do that? I mean, how you would think that he was there and not there? Is that because it goes against Greg Kading's statement that there was no LAPD officers that work for Death Row Records?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when it comes to, I believe we're talking about Reggie right now, right? I believe when it comes to him that he tends to say things before he thinks them through. And if with Reggie admitting that there are police officers there, even one, then that, like you said, it goes against what Greg Kading has said in Murder Rap. And I find it very interesting if you watch the Fox special or any subsequent specials after that, but specifically the Fox special, when asked if Reggie Wright Jr. knew David Mack or Rafael Perez, he said no. But when he said those were Suge's boys, but when they got Suge Knight on the phone, he threw Reggie Wright Jr. right under the bus and said those guys worked for Reggie. So I think the whole Greg Kading Murder Rap narrative that there were zero cops involved with Death Row Records or working for Death Row Records has been completely blown the F out of the water just by the police documents that Russell Poole had. There are countless documents, whether it be Kenneth Knox, confidential informants that say off-duty police were working, off-duty police were working for Death Row Records. And what you have to keep in mind, off-duty police are not ex-cops, they are current cops that are working a side job. So yeah, I think that Reggie caught himself on that and doesn't want to go against the grain because him and Greg Kading, I mean, let's just put it this way. Would you go against a narrative that clears you and your fellow police officers of any wrongdoing? I mean, I would back Murder Rap too if it cleared me in the murder of Biggie. And I think that's what people are missing, is the connection between Reggie Wright Jr. and the murder of the Notorious B.I.G.
Well, let me tell you, there's always that code of blue, code of honor, where police don't tell on each other, and we know it's out there. It's not some fable that exists. It's the real deal. Police do not tell on each other, and I'll pretty much leave it at that. Are there any pictures, any photos of David Mack and Rafael Perez with anybody from Death Row? I mean, is there anybody that had pictures out there?
I haven't personally seen any, but I think a good lead, because I know you investigate, would be Simone Green. Simone Green was Death Row's photographer, and I believe that if there are pictures out there, I haven't identified them, but what I think is telling is when they finally raided David Mack's home for a bank robbery, they found a whole shrine to Tupac and pictures of him in red suits hanging out with people from death row. So I think that David Mack personally had those pictures, and if I'm recalling right, I do believe that there's a picture of David Mack in a red suit standing right next to a death row associate that was in Simone Green's book, Time Served, My Life at Death Row Records.
Gotcha. All right. Has anybody is David Mack? Is he still out there? Is he hiding? What is he up to these days? Any word on David Mack or even we know Rafael Perez? We know he's driving limos out in California, giving rides to Harvey Weinstein's daughter and of course Harvey Weinstein. But David Mack, any information on David Mack?
I have absolutely zero information on the whereabouts of David Mack. I would love to find David Mack, but I attribute David Mack to one of those people like Trevon Lane. And a lot of people think that Trevon Lane just doesn't speak for, he doesn't want to talk about death row. I think that Trevon Lane is one of the smartest people in the world because I believe he knows what's up, and people that know what's up, they're not going to be talking. I think that's why I think David Mack has made himself inaccessible for that. The very same reason that Trevon Lane has.
What about Amir Muhammad? Any information on Amir Muhammad?
Amir Muhammad, Harry Billups, he's still out there. He has a LinkedIn profile. You can look up. You can look up Harry Billups on LinkedIn. So he's out there still doing his thing. But getting him to talk is like pulling nails.
Don't you find it interesting that out of all the people and all the witnesses that were there that night at the Wayne, was it the Peterson Museum, that nobody has ever really come out except for Greg Kading and the other person that mentioned Wardell Pucci Faust, that no one's ever identified Wardell as being the shooter, but you have several witnesses that have identified Amir Muhammad as being the person that was there that night and the person that they seen near that SS Impala. Don't you find that kind of interesting?
No, I find it completely interesting. I believe that Greg Kading, let me go into the spiel here just for a second. Gene Deal, who I've talked to and I still have an unreleased interview with, Gene Deal holds firm to this day that he saw Amir Muhammad, and that is the person who did the shooting. Gene Deal would be the equivalent of Gaddafi being the eyewitness in the Tupac Shakur killing. Gene Deal was there. Gene Deal saw and identified Amir Muhammad and has accused Greg Kading several times of misrepresenting his statements. To give you a backstory of why I believe that Greg Kading goes the Pucci Faust route, is the task force that was built up, the murder rap task force that was built up, was based directly because Valletta Wallace was suing the Los Angeles Police Department for the wrongful death of her son. When the task force was set up, it was in response to this lawsuit from Valletta Wallace. Now the thing is Greg Kading was put on this task force along with a bunch of other cops who were disciplined. These were cops that had disciplinary reports in their file, so it's like the D League. But the thing about their task force is they were not allowed to see any of the documents that were related to the Wallace lawsuit. And these documents are the documents that deal with Amir Muhammad. So Greg Kading comes out and he says he does this thorough investigation. Yet he was barred from looking at documents that had to do with Valletta Wallace's claims that off-duty police officers were acting with death row records to have her son killed. So I think that it's very funny that there's a lot of criticism on Battle for Compton and the patent letter, but nobody ever criticizes where he got Wardell Pucci Faust's name from, which was a letter Roderick Reed wrote to Kevin Hackey. And he's never shown that letter publicly, and there's a reason for that. That letter says Reggie Wright Jr. and Death Row Police in it probably 10 or 12 times, and then one line about Pucci Faust. So for everybody out there very critical of the patent letter because of the half-dead line, I implore you, and maybe hell, we'll post it. The letter from Roderick Reed that Greg Kading uses to point the finger at Poochie Fowles also points the finger at Reggie Wright Jr.
Okay, perfect. You put it perfectly. So, would you be in agreement that David Mack, Rafael Perez, and Kevin Gaines were all friends?
Yes, I would say that there's an association between those three. Yes.
Okay, okay. So we're going here, and this has actually been a very interesting conversation, and we're just kind of carrying along. I don't want to get tied up too long in these conversations, but speaking on Reggie Wright Jr., was there you had the interview with him? Was there anything in the interview that you felt like that you didn't get to ask Reggie that you would certainly like to ask again if he had the opportunity to?
Oh, of course. Hindsight always being 2020. Let me preamble by saying, people said I didn't have time to prep and all that, but I knew about the interview about 2 days before it happened. I was given a text message about 15 minutes before go time telling me what time it was happening. I'm writing notes like crazy. In hindsight, I would have pushed him harder about the death row chain. I would have asked him about David Mack and Rafael Perez. But the problem with an Ask Me Anything is I wanted to ask the important questions and get as much as I could on record. It's kind of like RJ Bond says, if I would have hammered him about the chain, then we would have had an hour and a half conversation about that specific thing that he stated. So yes, and of course there's questions I would have liked to ask him. I would have liked to ask him about Suge's comments that David Mack and Rafael Perez were working directly for Reggie Wright Jr. I would have pressed him harder about the chain. But I think that I did what what I seeked out to do, which was just to get him for the first time in 20 years to provide a timeline of where he was and what he was doing the night that Tupac was shot.
Do you feel like he kind of danced around some of your questions, especially about the whole chain incident, that you'd asked him about the chain incident, and he kind of danced around that a little bit?
Yeah, I think Reggie was well prepared for that. Reggie, unbeknownst to me, Reggie had been watching our live streams quite a bit. So I think he knew our talking points. And if you notice, and there's other people that have interviewed Reggie too, if you notice in a Reggie Wright Jr. interview, you can ask him a direct question, and then 20 minutes later, he's talking about 5 other different things. So every time you get a point, like a point counterpoint in a real debate, by the time that you have the counterpoint, he's already moved on to 5 separate issues. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He robbed me of the chance to ask him, did you have anything to do with the death of Tupac? Because he, in the start of the interview, he's like, I didn't have nothing to do with Tupac, and then he filibusters. And, I'm not playing armchair quarterback. I've said publicly, I think I could have probably done a better job about it. But the thing about interviewing Reggie Wright Jr. is you're never going to get him to give you a precise answer. He's going to talk over you. He's going to, just like I said, filibuster, and he's never going to give you a simple yes or no.
Okay, got you. Yeah, I have to admit that it was to me it was a decent interview. He did a good job on it. I mean, it's really hard to kind of go through it, and I mean everybody has time to prepare for it. So I mean, it just seemed like some questions just got danced around on. But moving on to the next topic of discussion that's been pretty hot here in the last few days, few weeks, or whatnot. Tupac Shakur and the life theory and this whole Malik Shakur thing that's been taking place. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll start with the alive theory. I think that there's a lot of people just out of sheer respect and love for Tupac that would absolutely love to think that he's still alive or that he might come back just because they have so much love and respect for him. When it comes to friends and family of Tupac, you can tell there's, like, even in the Daryl Harper interview I did, he got pretty emotional when talking about Tupac. When you talk to the people that knew Tupac well, his friends and his family, there's unequivocally not a doubt in your mind that Tupac is gone. The Malik Shakur situation, I want to point out as a preamble to what I'm about to say, is Shakur is not a real last name. Shakur is like Malcolm X. He gave himself the last name X because he didn't know his real name because of a slave name. Now, the Panthers would also do this as well, and that's where the name Shakur comes from. And anybody can call themselves Shakur. I mean, Tupac's last name really wasn't Shakur. And I think that with the Malik situation is, if you're going to interview someone that says that they were Tupac's family or that they knew Tupac, and they're going to make those kind of claims, you had better damn well vet those people. Because if you have never heard of this guy, to give him a platform like that to say that the things he did about Afeni and other people, I think is reckless and irresponsible. I called it out very, very early that Malik Shakur was probably a fraud and reaching out, and I'm not the only one that did this. Other people did this as well, and I can't take credit for it. But people who did know Tupac Shakur completely said that Malik Shakur had nothing to do with the Shakur family, and he's just a fraud.
So you mean to tell me that he wasn't the one that was pushing Tupac Shakur the day after the Quad City shooting?
No, that's Charles Man Man Fuller in that picture, for anybody wondering. The guy pushing the wheelchair is Man Man. Man Man was arrested with Tupac when Tupac was brought up on the rape charge, and Man Man had been arrested with Tupac almost every single time he'd been arrested, right up until the time he went to prison. That is Man Man. That is his lifelong friend. That is not Malik Shakur. That is Charles Man Man Fuller.
Okay, Jmix, so you're telling me that the interview I did with Tupac's librarian, she says Tupac's alive, that I shouldn't believe her?
Not without some kind of proof. Yeah, I wouldn't take people on their word at face value unless you can find a Wikipedia page about them, a Discogs, or, they're just a well-known name. I think to be honest with you, I think it falls into the Page Hemis helicopter thing. Some people just give interviews for attention. Some people are just internet trolls. Now, maybe this Malik Shakur guy really respects and loves Tupac, but I think at the end of the day, he was just feeding everybody a line of bullshit. And yeah, if you interview Tupac's librarian, I think that's bullshit as well. Sorry, fam.
I'm sorry, I had to throw it in there. You got to throw in a little humor every now and again. Sometimes these things get a little too serious, but I mean, that goes to show you that you have to go out there and you have to really vet the information that you're actually getting. And I mean, you got to do it, because if not, then it'll certainly tarnish your credibility. But I will give Gab, he's a stand-up guy, and he keeps it 100. So for him to come out and put that out, that was really great of him to do that. So I'm sure he's gonna disassociate himself from anything that actually brought those elements to his channel, so that he doesn't fall into that kind of quagmire again. But man, this has been a great conversation, Jmix. Is there anything that you wanted to ask, or is there anything that you have on your mind?
No, I will touch upon the Gab thing. When I made the comment about the Malik Shakur thing, when you bring up Gab, at least Gab had the thought in his mind, I don't want to mislead my audience, so I'm going to do a video and say, look, I'm retracting this because it's unverified information. I think that is miles beyond other YouTubers that had multiple videos up about Malik Shakur that just deleted them quietly and started going on to other topics like, whoa, who killed Tupac? You can't have it both ways. If Tupac is alive, he's alive. Go with that. But if you get proven to have a fraud on your channel, or you're promoting a fraud, and I'm not talking about Gab right now, and you go back to who killed Tupac, I think it's intellectually dishonest, to say the least. Gab's always been a real cool dude with me, and I respect him coming out and saying, look, it was unverified information and I retract it. And that's the right thing to do. Hopefully, just with anything or anybody, he learns from that. We all make mistakes. But I do want to say something about my channel, and I want to defend RJ Bond just for a little bit. A lot of people have a problem with RJ Bond because they don't like him or they don't agree with his theory. One of the reasons that my relationship with RJ Bond is so strong is because when RJ Bond tells me something, or even to the minutest detail, RJ Bond will back it up with a document. So he doesn't just say things. And he has taught me over the course of the last 8 years or so, before you put something out, you want to vet it. You want to at least get a witness statement, someone who knew Pac, or you want to get a police file to back up what you say. And I take great pride in that. So if I put something out on this channel, or RJ Bond says something on this channel, you can take it to the bank that there is either a supporting document or a supporting witness to back up what is being said on this channel.
Perfectly said, or it's perfectly said about RJ. He's like I said, everybody has been kind of stand up. I mean, there's some individuals that, you know, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt on what they say. But just moving on, I want to go back to Orlando Anderson, and I want to really focus on the Corey Edwards statement. Now, in that series that came out, when Corey Edwards came out and said that they actually went back to the 662 Club to get a fair one, is what he said, a fair one, which would have been him and Orlando Anderson going. And to me, that sounds like a fight. Do you believe that they went initially to 662 to seek a fair one, or do you think that was a lie?
It's hard to make that call, because like I said, I was in contact with production during the beginning. I mean, it took about a year and a half for that show to actually find its grounding. Corey Edwards was pretty upset about the way he was portrayed. I don't know if he was edited out of context. I know that he made claims that he was edited out of context, but let's say that they did go to 662. What has already been established is Orlando Anderson, during all this time, people have to keep this in mind, after the fight, Tupac and the Entourage were already gone. So we see live on camera, we see that surveillance footage of him being interviewed by hotel security, him walking off with other people. Corey Edwards had put him in the bar. There's other witnesses that put him in the bar. And if you go by the time frame, Vibe magazine famously did this time frame of what version of events would have to happen for the shooting to happen the way it did. It is virtually impossible, with the official narrative of Orlando Anderson getting beat down to the time that he leaves being talked to by security. It is virtually impossible for them to make that route in the time that they did. If the statement that they edited of Corey Edwards saying that they went to 662 to get a fair one, it's very possible. But also keep in mind, if that statement is true, or if that is the aha statement, it flies directly in the face of murder rap, which the Keefe D confession says that that's not what happened at all. So you can't have it both ways when it comes to Corey Edwards.
Yes, correct. And speaking of murder rap, you know, I did watch that science fiction film, and it was a wonderful piece, by the way. and I do want to mention to you, though, on murder rap, when they say, actually he mentions Orlando Anderson, and this goes back to the Jake Robles shooting, and there's actually a book, it's called Dancing with the Devil, that I believe his name is Mark Curry, wrote the book, and he used to be associated with Brother Love, or whatever his name is these days. Well, he says in that book that Jason Brown was actually the shooter of Jake Robles, but in murder rap, Greg Kading states that it was the guy in the powder blue jacket, which one of the police officers that was there off duty working, you know, after hours to make some extra money, that he identified Orlando Anderson. Now, would you be in agreement that if Orlando Anderson killed Jake Robles that night in 1995, that he probably, especially with all the power that Death Row had, that he probably would have not made it to that night in September 7th? Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. It's funny that you bring up that story, because Greg Kading says years later that this police officer, I think it's Jeffries, I might be wrong about that. I have that full report up on my channel. If you read the actual police report of what happened, there is no indication or description that matches Orlando Anderson. And if 20 years later the cop says that could that was the guy, then it just, none of it makes any sense. Let's say, okay, let's say Greg Kading's right, like what you offered. Okay, why, if this big gang war happens after the shooting of Tupac Shakur, why does it not happen after the shooting of Jake Robles? So yes, if Orlando Anderson was the one who shot Jake Robles, then why wasn't he killed? And if Orlando Anderson was the one who shot Tupac and everybody knew it, then why wasn't he targeted in the gang war that happened in Compton afterwards? It just doesn't.
Well,
It takes a far reach of logic thought. You have to. You want to talk conspiracy theories. I mean, the conspiracy here is that Orlando Anderson is murdering people and getting away with it. People are knowing that he's doing it, but nobody's doing anything to stop him.
right, right, and so that's the first incident, right, with Orlando Anderson. Then the second incident would be the stealing of chains, and then the third incident would be of him supposedly killing Tupac Shakur. So he goes on for another 2 years and gets untouched by Death Row Records, but gets killed by somebody else. So you mean to tell me the biggest artist that you have in your record company, and you don't seek any kind of retaliation? Because let's face it, Death Row Records, as powerful they were as they were, and we can just come out and just say it, they were hitting people, and I don't mean hitting people, physically. I'm talking about taking people out. So if that was the case, then why didn't they take out Orlando Anderson, supposedly if he killed the highest paid artist on Death Row Records? So to me, that kind of just the story falls apart for me, especially that Robles gets killed in '95, and the guy in the powder blue jacket there is Orlando Anderson supposedly. So I always say that Orlando Anderson must be the Teflon Don. And not only that, but if he was doing all these murders and he had this big rap sheet, then it goes to show you that the police in Compton weren't really doing their job. And it just seemed like everybody that night, Las Vegas, Compton PD, and you could even say LAPD, all their police investigating tools and knowledge went by the wayside, and they forgot to be police officers. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. And to quote Frank Alexander, when asked why he changed his story, he said this to me. He said, "You would change your story too if you were watching Suge's homeboys kill people." It is it's well known. I mean, people say the streets are talking, but it's well known that people died as a result of crossing Death Row Records. And to bring up another fact when it comes to that, if it was Puffy, if it was Puffy and Orlando Anderson in the powder blue jacket during the Jake Robles incident in Atlanta, then why would they threaten Mark Anthony Bell? Why would they threaten Mark Anthony Bell for Puffy's information when they knew who Orlando Anderson was? And the reason I can say that they knew at the time, this is in '95, who Orlando Anderson was, is because when the alleged gang war broke out in Compton, Reggie Wright Sr. personally drove to Keith Davis's house and asked him, well, he told him that, "I don't care what you do, but if my son," meaning Reggie Wright Jr., "is touched, it's your ass." So Reggie Wright Jr. himself knew who Keith Davis and Orlando Anderson were in 1995. So if Orlando Anderson was the shooter of Jake Robles, then why at the Death Row Christmas party would they be looking for Puffy's information and not going after Orlando Anderson?
Very good point. Very good point. And not to get away from our conversation, but I'm kind of reading the board here, and we have different individuals saying that don't know how the streets work. Well, just to give you a little bit of information for you guys out there, I was a gang member in the '90s for quite a long time, so I know how the streets worked. And most of the time, when my homeboys did dirt, they didn't go out there bragging about it, because guess what? The guy who bragged about it was the first guy in jail. So I know how the streets work. And Jesse, I'm sure you know how the streets work too, because I know you said that you've actually have some friends that were affiliated or whatnot. So I just want to put that out there, because it seems like some of these guys that are out there think that their street is above all everybody else's, but now it's not, my friend.
Well, I
didn't grow up in the suburbs either.
I'll say this. I have family members that are gangster disciples, which is pretty common if you grow up in Illinois, especially the northern parts. And the way that the streets have always worked here is it's tit for tat. If you shoot one of our friends or one of my family's friends, the first person getting retaliated against is the person doing the shooting. It is literally tit for tat up here. And I'm coming from the murder capital of the country right now. I'm telling you, the way, people can disagree with me, but the way the streets work is, you take something from me, I'm going to take something for you, and I'm not going to wait 2-3 years to do it. We're going to do it right now. And that's my understanding of how the streets work. But, you know, to each their own.
Right, right. I hear you. And to everybody out there, Tidy Jones, please go to his channel. If you want to learn how to go broke in real estate, please go to his channel. You'll find yourself in bankruptcy court within 5 years, I guarantee you. So, anyhow, we're going to move on to our next topic here, Jmix. I'm sorry, I got kind of carried away here listening to some of these, actually reading some of these comments out there. So,
No, you're fine. I actually forgot we were live. I don't even have the comments. So, oops.
yeah, we're live. We have Tidy Bo Jones. He's typing away, and he's having a great time. So, just telling everybody out there, if you want to get a tutorial on how to go broke in real estate, go to his channel. You'll be filing bankruptcy in the next 5 years. Anyhow, we're going to carry on here, and man,
is that kind of like the I'll teach you how to be successful, just PayPal me $500, and then when you
no,
PayPal me $500, I tell you get other people to PayPal you $500?
no, he has he does this little real estate thing, like he's trying to be the Armando Montalago, but in reverse. He's broke. He doesn't have any money, so he comes on the channel and he just says a lot of things. So, you know, I like to bust his chops. It's all in good fun. I'm sure nobody will actually go to his channel, but you got me stonewalled here, Jesse. I'm over here thinking about that. But any let me ask you, you're doing the Tupac thing now? You've been doing it for a long time. You've been successful at it. Do you feel like any time soon that it may be coming to an end for you? Like you want to pursue other projects or other things?
The thing about the Tupac stuff is, you know, going back to the genesis of the interview, is, you know, I did it to get knowledge. I found out pretty much everything that I wanted to ever know about Tupac. And I think the channel will go its natural course. There's other projects that I'm working on, and the channel will probably take a back seat to that. I am very, very thankful, though, that I do have a lot of subscribers, and I do have a lot of supporters out there. So it's something that used to be something that I would do because I wanted to. Now it's anytime anything becomes something that you're compelled to do, it takes the passion out of it. I've said many times that I'm going to put up the unreleased interviews that I have. I have one with Frank Alexander that has never aired, and I'm gonna put out my back catalog that's been sitting stagnant, and you know, I'm gonna move from there. I don't really know. The passion, I always loved Tupac. I love his music. It's just the politics of YouTube that get a little old. So the future of the channel, there's going to be plenty of content coming up. But as far as conquering it or competing with other entities, it's not something that I started to do, and it's not something that I want to jump into the fray to do.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect response. I can certainly appreciate that. Is there any interview that's going to be your dream interview, that's going to kind of be your staple? This is the biggest, the greatest, the best interview you've ever done, and you can kind of take that off your bucket list? I
will get the Suge Knight interview. I will get it. I've been in talks with his people for the last 2.5 years. And I've been actually, a couple of the news stories that you saw concerning Toy Lynn Kelly came directly from Suge Knight. So once this trial is said and done, and he is either released or put into prison where he has his communication again, I will land that. And that'll probably be the swan song interview for me. But the thing is about Suge is, even a good interview with Suge, you don't know whether to believe anything he says, because he's told so many different contradictory things. And I think that would be some of the questions that I'd ask Suge, is why do you say these things, dude? Why you tell people that Tupac is alive, or they need to go after Puffy, or co-sign Tupac 187? What's the end game?
Do you think that he's gonna get free from these charges? Do you think he's gonna be able to dodge them?
No. I think if you notice the progression of the case, it has gone strictly from the hit and run incident at Tams concerning Terry Carter to threatening F. Gary Gray to violating court orders. They seem to be piling more and more and more on top of Suge, because I think that they know that the original case, and they still got the armed robbery with the photographer case hanging over his head that Cat Williams settled. But I think the weaker that the Terry Carter case got, the more charges that they were just going to throw on Suge. I think the end game is to put him in prison. And I think that they will be successful at that, just because it's hard to fight the power structure.
Yeah, I think some people are going to disappear, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it as in maybe the bribery of some of these witnesses may have worked to some degree. Maybe in the robbery of the camera case, the other one that he's facing with the Tam's Burger Joint hit and run or whatever. I think that one's going to be a little hard to actually get away from. But I mean, you do have Claiborne Jones or Claiborne, whatever his name is, going after Suge Knight with something in his hand. Do you think that was a radio, or do you think that was a gun?
No, I absolutely believe that was a gun. I don't think that was a radio at all. I mean, when you watch the person pick up the item, they put it in their back waistband. Nobody does that with a radio. But I'll give it to him. I'll give him some credit where it's due. He did refuse to tell on Suge Knight or put Suge Knight in a position where he'd have to testify against him. So whatever street beef they had, I'll give it to Sloan for sticking to his guns and keeping street code when it comes to Suge Knight. I thought that was pretty honorable, if there can be honor in that situation.
Now, if for some chance Suge Knight beats the charges, do you feel like he could ever create another successful record company?
Not with his reputation in the industry. They have two feelings that I found out during numerous trips to LA. Either Suge Knight is just toxic to them, they don't want anything to do with him, or they're still scared of him from incidents that happened 20 years ago. I think Suge Knight, even on the streets, I don't think starting a record label would be his concern. His concern would be his own safety, because as we both know, there's been multiple attempts on Suge Knight's life, and it seems if the longer he stays in Los Angeles, if he's free, the higher the chance that he will be killed. And it's an unfortunate situation, but I don't think that he'll ever have another successful business. Not with the magnifying glass that is on him. And I think it's a shame, because I've talked to a lot of people that are real close to Suge to say he's a good dude. He gave a lot of people jobs, and he treated a lot of people well. So for every horror story you hear about Suge Knight, there's also a story where he, like with Daryl Harper, he didn't have to pay Daryl Harper anything, but he saw that he was hungry, and he gave him $1,000 every week. And even by Daryl's own standards, he wasn't a good producer. So I think there's redeeming qualities for Suge. I don't think he'll ever get another record company.
You think he still has assets? You think he still has money, or do you think he's broke?
I heard a rumor that he has his bail money, but the problem with the $23 million, but the problem with him posting that bail money is that, forgive me one second. I think the problem with the bail money is the Los Angeles County court system wanted to vet where that money came from. So there's been, I know behind the scenes, you've heard Whack 100 come out and say he was going to help with that money. And you've heard Floyd Mayweather even make comments that he was going to come out with that money. What they were going to do was use Suge's own money. But because the court system is insistent on vetting where the money comes from, that's why the bond's never been posted. But for those that know their history about Death Row Records, it wasn't a month after Tupac was shot that Masters and the whole recording studios of Can-Am and Death Row Records was moved over to the Bahamas. I believe that Suge has been living off offshore accounts for quite some time. I don't think he's broke by any standards. I think that he is a multimillionaire a couple times over. Referring to the bail money, I was told by people that knew him that he had the bail money. He just couldn't post it because they wanted to know where it came from.
Do you feel like the reason why that they're actually, and I've heard it here and there, that they're being so hard on Suge Knight and pretty much suppressing just his liberties is because he knows a lot of information that would implicate LAPD and some of the crimes that were committed against, you know who, Notorious B.I.G. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I believe that's why they're limiting his contact. They're not allowing him to hire investigators. They're not letting him have proper legal counsel. I think that Suge Knight is a dangerous man just because of what he knows. Like I had said earlier in the interview, the same off-duty officers that were working for Death Row Records might have just been officers back then, but now they're lieutenants and sergeants. And if you see the head of the LAPD, Charlie Beck, has just recently stepped down. So that means either Rampart Part 2 is coming, or it's like Oprah said when she was talking about racism, and she said that racism would die out when the older white people would die out, meaning that the older way of doing things, once it dies out, a newer way of doing things can come to fruition. I believe the same thing is true with the Los Angeles Police Department. Once the older brass start to drop out of and they're not the top brass anymore, maybe we'll see more transparency with the Los Angeles Police Department, and that's my only hope for any kind of fairness when it comes to Suge Knight, or any kind of fairness when it comes to the solving the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Excellent point. You hit it right on. I mean, that's one of the weakest arguments that I've seen on actually YouTube, especially, is got just the race card, the racist card, the whole culture vulture, and it seems like you can't talk about anybody else's culture because that's not who you are. Which, to me, it's like we're in a free country and we can talk about anything we want as long as it's in a positive nature, which it always is. I mean, and I don't believe for 1 minute that you're a racist. You're not a racist. I mean, that is a ridiculous statement to make, but I wanted to just say that out publicly because I know sometimes it's you get some flack for that, and I just think it's unfair. But what it is that they've run out of ammo to attack you with. They can't attack you with anything else. So for most people, the only way they can attack you is by pulling out the race card. So I just say, man, for those people out there that are pulling the race card out, you got to pick up and catch up and figure out a new way to beat other guys and other people that you try to beat on YouTube without bringing up race. So I'll end it with that as far as race is concerned. But very, very good interview. Everything that I've been wanting to ask you for many years. And like you said, we've had a conflict in time, so it's been really hard to get in contact with you, but this has been an amazing interview. I still have a few more questions. If you can stay on, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, go ahead, boss.
Okay, so Suge Knight essentially has the bail money. If he gets out, do you think he's going to go into seclusion? We'll never hear from Suge Knight again?
No, I don't think that's how Suge Knight rolls, to be honest with you. I think if Suge Knight gets out, he would continue to do the same thing he always has. You have to keep in mind that for the last 20 years, Suge Knight has walked around without a bodyguard. And that's what's made him so susceptible to attempts on his life, is because Suge Knight was out there in the streets and was out there publicly. And I like to think that people change, and I like to think that people change the way they operate. But I don't think that people really ever do. I think they learn from their past experiences, but I don't think that people naturally change their habits. And unfortunately, I think that if Suge Knight is released, he will go back to doing the things that he always did, which, he does have family ties in LA. He does have kids in Los Angeles, and I don't foresee him going into hiding or seclusion.
You mean to tell me, Jmix, that he's not going to go to South Africa and go hide with Tupac? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know if it's South Africa or Cuba at this point, but no, I don't think so. And I don't think he would have a Mob and Peace tattoo for Tupac if he thought that Tupac was still alive.
Right. And I don't think either. And I just bring that point up about Tupac, that he would not go run and hide because that's not his nature. And if Tupac ever did that, then he'd probably be one of the worst people ever. But that is not his nature. Tupac Shakur would take on anything head on, whether or not it was going to prison or whatnot. Because if you think about it, Jesse, he'd been out quicker than you think. I mean, what did they give him, a 4-year sentence or whatnot? He
Yeah. Yeah, and here in Illinois, they call it a 6-month turnaround. Let's say you violate your bail or parole violation at most, or they send him back to prison. He would have already had time served, and typically on prison time, they cut your time in half instantly. So Tupac was only really looking about 8 or 9 months max, even if he went back to prison on those rape charges.
Yeah, I I couldn't agree with you more. Favorite Tupac album?
That's a tough one. All Eyes on Me. It has to be. When I was, see, I'm an old cat. When I was 17 and it was out on cassette, we would choose what party we would go to based on who had it, because it was $30, and in 1996 money, that was a lot of money. That's probably like $60, $70 in today's money, to be honest with you. So if you had that double tape and there was conflicting parties, we would go to whoever had that album. So it has to be that album. There's like a deeper political album would be Machiavelli. It's really dark and I like it. Are You Still Down? That the first posthumous album. I guess Still I Rise was Still I Rise. I can't remember which one was first. But I tell you what, Are You Still Down is the way that you should have done every posthumous album. Get the original producers on there, get them to remake the songs. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be All Eyes on Me, just because of the memories it brings. That whole album was banging. Shout
I
out to
think.
Johnny J too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was a great producer. I would say that my favorite album would have probably been Me Against the World. That was Tupac to me at his finest. But there's a question here that keeps ringing out in the actual forum, and they're asking me to ask you about John Potash, and I don't know if you want to make that a short answer, because I know that question could get pretty long. So, in a short answer, do you want to tell me what
What's the
you
question about
think?
John?
I don't even know. What do you think about his theory? Probably, if I had to guess, what do you think about John Potash's theory?
I think John Potash is a smart guy. It's funny that that's being brought up because I just talked to John on Facebook Messenger. I'm going to be interviewing John again for his new book mid-February. I think that I think he's really smart dude, and I think that he's right about COINTEL on a lot of things. Now, the FBI was surveillancing Tupac. They were building RICO cases against Death Row Records. I think that John is on to something because even though it's like I've always said, you don't have to agree with everything another man does and still be cool with them and still have common ground. If you can find common ground, then it makes for a more intellectual discussion. Now, John Potash, I sent him a message and I said, hey, I had brought up earlier in the interview the LAPD officers that were caught running drugs between Los Angeles and Vegas. I said that to John. I said, you know, you got a new book out, and we're noticing with Reggie Wright Jr. and with LAPD cops getting busted left and right, you know, that maybe this ties into what you're talking about. You know, it might not just be FBI COINTELPRO. You know, obviously they're going to use police officers as well. So I'm going to have him on the show probably, like I said, middle of February, and we're going to hash that out. I have nothing but respect for John. I don't agree with his whole theory. I don't think that it was COINTELPRO that had him killed, but I think that if you look at the police angle and you look at it from that set of eyes and you read John Potash's book, The War on FBI Leaders and Tupac Shakur, that you can draw some parallels there. I think John's on the right track. He's obviously a smarter guy than I am, but I don't think John has had as much access as RJ Bond and myself and others to the actual police files. And I think that if I can show John some of these, maybe he can give us a better educated guess on what he think really happened to Tupac.
Okay. Speaking on the FBI, there's been claims that the FBI was actually trailing Notorious B.I.G. the night of the shooting in Los Angeles, and Biggie, and actually Sean Puffy Combs telling somebody that the FBI was trailing him. Do you believe that he said the FBI was trailing him just so that he could get those guys that he didn't want around him off his back? You know, kind of like, you know, the police are watching me, so hey, you got to stay away. Or do you think the FBI was actually trailing him that night?
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say it's awfully convenient that there's a video of the shooting. Now, we've all seen the video, I'm assuming, and it does look like amateur video. But keep in mind, in '97, to have a camcorder at the ready is something that not a lot of people had. And I think that it's very, very plausible that the FBI was trailing Sean Puffy Combs that night, just due to the simple fact that they were already working RICO investigations into Death Row Records, and they already had Mookie management and East Coast actual mafia members involved in the management of 662. So I think it's very possible that Sean Combs' name had come up a few times under their investigation of Death Row Records. So if I had to take a best educated guess, I would say, of course, that they were being trailed that night. And it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Tupac was being watched that the night he was shot. But I would draw back to that footage of Biggie actually getting shot. It appears to be amateur footage, but you got to ask yourself why someone sitting outside the Peterson Museum with a big old-fashioned VHS recorder in their hands. To me, that just doesn't smell right.
Do you think it was edited? Because it looked kind of edited to me. If
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was edited for context, and I think it was edited with an overlay, with voices over the top. Because if you notice a '96 video, it kind of has a World Star effect to it now. If you listen to it, it's like, oh no, that just happened. I think that that's an edit. And now I'm putting my tinfoil hat on to say that, but I mean, you have to keep in mind, if you just look at it at face value, Sean Combs says he's being trailed by the FBI, and poof, there's video of what happened that night from a car that was parked. So, I mean, to me, that rings true.
That car that was there, that was in that footage, you think that that was the car that was involved in the shooting?
The one that they actually caught? Yes, I do believe that that is the Impala that's in that.
Was that real footage that they? I'm going back to that science fiction film, Murder Rap. Was that real footage of the car coming out, or a car coming out of a garage where the videotape was black and white and it was flickering back and forth? Did you see that part, or was that just like a recreation?
I believe that's a recreation. They spent a lot of time filming at the Peterson Automotive Museum, and they actually had leased the same cars that were used in the A&E special from the same company. So they had recreated most of that. I believe that that is a recreation.
Okay. So
and a fun tip too, they actually released the same car for the Johnny Depp movie Labyrinth about Russell Poole. So they used the same museum, obviously, and the same cars that they used in Murder Rap and in the A&E special. It's actually a custom place out of Los Angeles that leases those cars.
That's going to be a great movie. Speaking about Labyrinth, do you know when that movie's coming out?
Last I was told, it was pushed to September of this year. I did talk to Russell Poole's son. I did an interview with him in Long Beach, and I sat and had a beer with him. He was showing me, because he was on set and he was filming it, he was showing me some of the shots that were filmed, and it looks pretty damn good, to be honest with you. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, me too. It's actually going to give us the version that, you know, and I always say Russell Poole was an actual really, really good cop and very honorable, and he had no reason. I mean, as much investigation he did and all the history he had with the LAPD, I don't find any reason why he had to make up any story about who he suspected to be involved with the Notorious B.I.G. And that's the thing that gets me, Jesse, is that a lot of these people think that, you know, you have Russell Poole, who's a dedicated police officer, many successful investigations and high profile investigation, that he's just going to decide to one day out of thin air just make up a story about these cops that he knew nothing about, and just make up this grand story to sell to the public, and really risk his career, risk his livelihood to do that. So
Well,
I go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry to cut you off there, but here's the thing about Russell Poole. Russell Poole was a homicide detective that actually solved 108 murder cases. Russell Poole solved 108 murder cases. Now, if you compare that to, I guess, the other side of the fence, a Greg Kading never solved a murder case in his whole career. Russell Poole was very dedicated. I've talked to members of his family, and I know that one thing that I want to make clear to everybody is Valletta Wallace, when she met Russell Poole's son, when they were filming Labyrinth, she said, I always believed and trusted in your dad because your dad, meaning Russell Poole, was the only one who called my son by his name, which was Christopher.
Okay.
I think that he took that case very seriously because I believe that he knew that, just like with the Rampart scandal that he blew wide open, I believe that Russell Poole knew that there were rogue cops involved, and he was like a dinosaur. He's one of the good guys. He was the good cop, because even in today's age, with all the police violence that's being put everywhere on social media, there are still good cops out there, and I believe that Russell Poole was one of those.
Absolutely. So you're telling me, Jesse, that the Russell Poole, he never pointed a gun at an infant. Is that what you're telling me?
That wasn't fair. No,
No, I'm
no,
not gonna.
no,
We're not gonna go.
no. Russell Poole never did that. I can think of someone on the other side of the fence that might have did that, but I guess they can tell Judy that Newton Street was there.
No, no. I was just trying to throw some humor in there. It's all good, man. We know the story. We know what's happened, and we know that Oprah didn't kill Tupac, according to the report, because we do have reports that come in. So yeah, I was just throwing it in there. I didn't want to just try and liven it up for the room. So anyhow, is I'm running out of questions here. I mean, you're like the encyclopedia for, like I said, Tupac. You know everything about Tupac, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time to answer all these questions. And I'm sure that there's a whole lot that we can talk about. I'm sure we can talk for many hours. So I'm gonna maybe cut it short here. Probably give another 5 minutes. Is there anything that you like to say? I'd like you to plug your channel, any upcoming projects, anything that you want to speak on that you feel is important for the Tupac Nation to know.
Yeah, I want everybody to go check out your channel, Jmkaze Podcast. Go subscribe to his channel. He's at 820. Get him up to 1,000 so he's not getting hit with the YouTube ban hammer. And I appreciate everybody out there that's just out there for some truth. Look, we're not always going to agree on who killed Tupac, or is Tupac in Cuba or not. But one thing I think that we can all agree on is, if we're on this channel or if we're over there on Jmkaze's channel, that we all share a common theme. And that's what this is about, finding common ground. So I think it's safe to say that we're all Tupac fans. And as long as we're keeping his memory alive out there, and we're digging and doing the best that we can to uphold his legacy and try to solve his murder, that is, if we can find that common ground, that us on the internet, us as Tupac fans, will be unstoppable. Mo Preen famously said, Tupac fans ain't no joke. And that is the truest shit I've ever heard anybody say. He's absolutely right about that. So even for the people out there right now in this live chat that don't agree with me, that's fine. We need to find the common ground, which is a love for Tupac. And no matter if we disagree, our conversation is keeping his name alive, and our conversation can lead to other things that could eventually solve his murder. Tupac liked to say that he might not change the world, but he'll definitely spark the mind of the person that will. I like to say this channel might not solve the murder of Tupac, but it might very well spark the mind of the person that will. I've not claimed to solve anything, but just like most Tupac fans out there, I'm just digging as hard as I can for the truth.
Well said, Jesse. Now, before we go, I'm going to leave you with this last question. Do you
Right on.
think the Tupac investigation, murder, is ever going to be solved?
I think that there's a possibility of that happening if we see a shakeup in the hierarchy of LAPD. I believe that Vegas wants to close this case, and I believe that Vegas is sitting on a lot more information than is publicly known, but they're not going to give that information to an LAPD. LAPD leak any and all information that they get as soon as they get it to places like TMZ. So I think once we see, and we're starting to see it now, people like Charlie Beck stepping down, and once they shake up the LAPD a bit and do some internal house cleaning, I think we're seeing that now, and I think there's a very good probability it could happen in our lifetimes. One could hold out hope, but I'm going to be realistic and say that until police are willing to out their own, until they're willing to become a Russell Poole and call out corruption for what it is, until that happens, we probably won't see justice for Tupac. Because I firmly believe, and I will pick this hill to die on, that the reason that the murder of Tupac Shakur has not been solved is because there were off-duty police officers involved with it.
Absolutely. Good point. Yeah, you're certainly right. That's the reason why that these crimes have gone unsolved, is just for that same reason you said, because there was off-duty police officers that were involved. Now, I won't make any allegations onto who those police officers were, but you folks out there can go out and make your own assessment on that. Anyhow, Jmix, I want to say thank you for doing this interview with me. I want to thank everybody out there who's in the chat board, even the people that came out, the trolls that came out. We certainly appreciate you pushing up the numbers. I'm certain Jmix appreciates it. Jmix, I'm gonna leave you with your last words. I know that you already gave your last declaration, but if you want to thank the fans out there, and hopefully we can do this again soon in the future. Maybe not an interview, but I'd certainly love to get on the live stream with you and talk about Tupac and Tupac in general. Just think about this for a minute. How many artists do you know to this day, 20 years after he has died, that his legacy still lives? If you can answer that, then you know who it is.
That's what's up. And like I said, I appreciate you taking the time, dude. You're a really good dude. I enjoyed talking to you. And as soon as this live stream is over, it's going to be archived. You won't be able to see it. If you do want to see it, you go check out Jmkaze's channel. It's going to be posted on there for everybody who missed any of this. So one love, everybody. I appreciate everybody coming out to listen to this little back and forth between me and Jmkaze, and I recommend everybody go check out his channel.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. Everybody have a good night.
You too, bud. Thanks, man.
Thank you.